Hi everyone, it's Nicole Spohr here today, and I am sharing a couple of birthday cards using the brand new July 2020 My Favorite Things Release products. We're going to be focusing on the Big Birthday Wishes die and using it two ways. These are pretty clean and simple cards. One card we are going to focus on having kind of a rainbow effect of pattern paper letters with this big birthday wishes die, and on the other one we're going to do a simple stenciled background, die cut the sentiment from that background, and then kind of pop it up with some additional inlay layers and then layers on top of that, and add a simple glossy accents to the top with some glitter to make it really pop. Let's start with our pattern paper background. To really make the most of this and not have to die cut this entire panel multiple times, I actually just took my scissors and cut little squares from these pattern papers. So all of this pattern paper here is the My Favorite Things Summertime Polka Dots pattern paper, and it comes in a fantastic pastel rainbow. So I'm simply just cutting little squares, laying them over the letters I want to die cut, and then running them through my die cutting machine. As I got more of these done, I would do more letters at one time than just one or two, but I wanted to show you that this was just a really easy way to not waste a ton of pattern paper. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and create a lot of birthday cards with this technique, you could die cut the whole thing and then just simply mix and match the letters if you want to. But if you want to save as much of the pattern paper as possible, this is a great way, because you can see here on the right side of the screen, I haven't really altered the pattern paper that much or wasted a whole lot. So the goal for me here was to waste as little of the paper as possible so I can use those for other projects. I absolutely love this little mini polka dot paper. Really, really pretty. This is not from the July release. I'd like to say I think it's from the June release. Don't quote me on that. So it's still fairly new, but it comes in a whole rainbow assortment, and I used the majority of the colors from this 6x6 paper pack. So we're going to continue to die cut those letters. The only thing I didn't use the summertime polka dots for is the big letters. And I contemplated, I kind of went back and forth what I wanted to use for the big letters on my card. And ultimately I decided that I felt like the polka dot I just needed to break that up a little bit. So while I was working on what do I want to use for that, I also knew I did not want to use a plain white background. I thought I wanted to use something very, very subtle, and when I'm looking for subtle, I generally go for a light gray. This is the Simon Says Stamp Fog Gray cardstock, trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4 inches, and then I used the Big Birthday Wishes My Favorite Things die to die cut the sentiment from this. And then I'm going to go ahead and put adhesive on my white card base. This is a top fold card base, and I'm going to place that panel down in place. And then I have die cut additional letters from white cardstock, and we are going to inlay those into the design. Now, if I had been thinking about this, I probably would have just gone ahead and inlaid in the gray letters first, just as an extra layer of letters, because I think I ended up doing maybe 2 additional layers on top of this. I believe there's 2 white layers, the gray cardstock layer, and then the pattern paper layer. What I was looking for here was a little bit of dimension with these letters, and by die cutting the sentiment from my background first and then inlaying it and stacking the layers one on top of another, it gives me perfect placement. I don't have to worry about lining the letters up perfectly on a light gray background. I'm going to just kind of pop all these little pieces in. I saved all of the light gray pieces to place in the center of my letters. I'm using the Spellbinders Tool-in-One piercing tool to pop all my letters out of my die if anything is sticking. And I'm using a little Ranger Multi-Matte Medium with a fine tip applicator to just draw a line of glue here on each letter as I am stacking these in place. It's a little time consuming just to do it this way. However, it doesn't really take that long. And here is that gray layer. I didn't want it to go to waste. I needed an extra layer of cardstock, and I realized I could just go ahead and use that gray layer. It's going to be completely covered up with my pattern paper anyway, so this again just allows me to have an extra layer of cardstock. So I would kind of work one word at a time. And I'm just going to stack all of those little pieces, and then we're going to get to the magic here in a minute with that little pastel rainbow of letters. And that's really what makes this card shine, in my opinion. I think it's also a really great, versatile birthday card design. It's not super feminine. I think you could send this to anyone. It's pretty generic, actually, and very clean and simple. I don't always do a ton of clean and simple, and so for me, finding little ways to dress up a clean and simple design, in this case a rainbow of letters, really makes this a special fun card. So we just have a few letters left here to add before we can start with those great little pattern paper layers. Now, if you don't want to add a bunch of pattern paper layers, there is always an option of using fun foam. You could die cut the letters from fun foam and place those there, and then finish with your pattern paper or cardstock or whatever it might be on top. That is another option. So I am starting to add my pattern paper layers. Look how pretty these are. Oh, I love this. And I really love the consistency that all of the letters for birthday and wishes are these pastel polka dot rainbows. And then our big letters are going to be this really fun stripe that pulls color from these pastel polka dot letters, but it's going to be just a nice little stripe, and we'll see that here in a minute. And the stripe is actually going to be from the Fun in the Sun paper pad. Again, this came out at the same time as the Summertime Polka Dots, and I think it's from the June release. And I love the colors in both of these pattern paper pads. Lots of bright, colorful patterns, lots of rainbow kind of looks, which I'm always a big fan of. So there is my big letters. And then I did die cut using the My Favorite Things piece of cake, which is actually a die cut little slice of cake die from the July release, but I'm only using the little flame to make the letter I a candle. So we just cut that from some of the yellow polka dot pattern paper. And then below, we're going to use a sentiment from the new My Favorite Things balloon bundle stamp set that says we are definitely going to celebrate, and we are going to stamp right below that the word wishes on our background with clear embossing ink and add white embossing powder. I did leave the stamp in my MISTI, and it's such a good thing I did, because I sprinkled on my embossing powder and I could tell right away I didn't get a very good stamped impression. I probably should have stamped this and embossed it before adding all my layers of letters. I wasn't thinking. I kind of forgot I wanted to add a stamped sentiment. It happens. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back in my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp that again, add another layer of white embossing powder, and then heat set that so that I have that nice white sentiment right below. And I think the addition of a little stamped phrase there really just kind of finishes that card design. So the last thing I'm going to do is add a little Nouveau crystal drops in White Blizzard to the tip of the candle and let that dry for a little sparkly flame. Let's go on to our second card. So this is the second way that I'm going to be using the Big Birthday Wishes sentiment die from My Favorite Things. I'm using one of my favorite products from the July release, which is the Big Balloon Stencil. This is an awesome stencil. I'm going to use a whole bunch of Simon Says Stamp dye inks with this stencil, and we are going to make a balloon background. So basically for this one, we use pattern paper on the first card. We're going to create our own pattern paper for the second card. And I tried to use a lot of ink colors that really resembled or were similar to the colors of pattern paper I used for the first card design. So that yellow color is Simon Says Stamp Duckling ink. Then we're using Simon Says Stamp Apricot ink, and I'm kind of starting in one corner and working my way out and down as far as adding my balloons. And the beauty of this is the overlap of the balloon designs. This is a big balloon, so it is going to take up a lot of area, but I really wanted to showcase how you can stencil that balloon multiple times on a standard A2 sized card front. This is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch smooth white panel. The pink color I'm using is Simon Says Stamp Twirling TUTU ink. And I have a blender brush for each color you might see here. They have little collars around them with the color that the brush is. This is the tool, or the stand, pardon me, that I'm using to hold my blender brushes. I have 2 of these. I have one of these for like dye inks, and then I've got another one for Distress Oxide inks. Kind of the things I use most often, I would say, for blending. And I just use one brush per color. The little collars that I'm using to tell me what color the brush is are from a company on Etsy called Make It by Marco, and I will list that in the description here on YouTube. So if you are curious how I know what brush is what color, you can grab those there. They are really fantastic, and I am planning on doing a video soon, or uploading it soon, pardon me, that will show you kind of my blending brushes and how I use them and how I am storing them currently. This purple color is Simon Says Stamp Wisteria, and that's probably going to be the biggest balloon on my card. I didn't really plan it that way. Like I said, I'm just kind of starting in one area and working my way out and down, which is just filling in all the little areas. And so now I want to grab some blue. This is Lake Shores, and I believe I've got blue, purple, and then a little bit darker purple, or blue violet color. So I've got the Lake Shores color, and then green is going to be Simon Says Stamp Jelly Bean Green, and the darker blue violet is going to be oh gosh, actually guys, that light purple I used is Thistle, and Wisteria is the darker purple. I knew I would get those confused. Sorry about that. Anyhow, I have listed all of those down below here in the supplies. I have also listed them out on my blog. So if you want to know exactly which colors I was using there, you can find that information on my blog as well. I'm almost done filling in my card. I think I need to add a couple of those dark purpley blue violet areas. So we're going to have one in the upper left corner and one down along the bottom edge. And then once we have that, I'm just going to clean my stencil really good with, you can use a little stamp cleaner. I don't even think I had to use stamp cleaner because I cleaned it right away. I'm just going to take a microfiber cloth, wipe away that excess ink. Now from the background then of this card, we're actually going to die cut the big birthday wishes sentiment again. And this time I don't want to waste any of that stenciling. This is going to be a really super subtle design. So it's going to be some raised letters, meaning we're going to inlay some layers underneath with white cardstock. And I believe I did one extra layer on this than I did on the previous card, simply because we're finishing with the same pattern as our background, and I really wanted it to pop, and I'll show you how I'm going to really make it show up as we finish off this card design. So I really love a stenciled background where we're adding that die cut layer right on top of it, but giving it dimension. So we're going to die cut Big Birthday Wishes from the stencil. We're going to also die cut, I think, 3 extra layers from smooth white cardstock, and then we're going to adhere these one on top of another onto our card base, and we are going to finish with the stenciled part of the letter. So I'm being really careful to hold on to all of the little bits and pieces. Any of the little inside pieces need to be inlaid into that first layer. And I'm using that Spellbinders Tool-in-One, which is my most often used tool in my craft stash when I'm paper crafting, simply because it comes in so handy and you can switch out the tips on this. It is phenomenal. So now we're going to go ahead and pop in all of those little white layers. And you can see I moved kind of all of the stenciled die cut letters over to the side, and I'm making a stack of the white letters so that I can go ahead and put my first layer of white into my card. I found it easiest to kind of just work one step at a time. That way I'm not losing any of those little bits and pieces. And here are the inside pieces for my card. For example, the inside of the letter B, be sure that you put the pink inside part where it's pink and the purple where it's purple. Just little things like that. If you have multiple little inside piece areas, you want to make sure you get them in the right order so that there is a seamless look from the letter to the background. And then we're just adding all the little inside pieces. And then I will add a couple more layers and finish with the pattern paper, the stenciled pattern paper layer on top. So here it is all finished up with my pattern paper, and you can see it. It looks beautiful like this, but I am going to do something to really make it stand out. First, I want to add my stamped sentiment. I'm using that same balloon bundle sentiment I used before, stamped this time with wisteria ink along the bottom edge, so it'll definitely be a little more subtle probably. And then I'm going to take glossy accents and completely cover each letter with glossy accents. Now that would look beautiful as is. You could totally let the glossy accents completely dry. It's going to give you glossy raised letters, which is so pretty. It's one of my favorite things to do with a die cut reading like this that you want to show up a little bit more. I know as it's wet here, it's not really going to show a whole lot. But what I ended up doing is I'm going to add some glitter into the wet glossy accents, which is going to give just the letters, not the background, sparkle. And that's going to help them show up even more. And I'm purposely going to pick a chunky kind of glitter. We're going to be using the Lawn Fawn Chunky Glitter, which is a beautiful iridescent glitter. And I'm going to just pick it up with my fingers and kind of sprinkle it over my entire card front, all of the letters with the glossy accents, and it's going to sit and kind of sink into the wet glossy accents. And I'm going to let that sit and completely air dry before I go and knock off that excess glitter, because the background's going to have a ton of glitter on it. You can see here it's getting everywhere. But I can tap that off onto like a scrap piece of paper or some sort of funnel, and I can funnel any of that excess glitter back into my jar. So I didn't worry too much about getting a lot of glitter everywhere else, because I can, like I said, once the glossy accents is dry, I can save any of that excess. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for these 2 Big Birthday Wishes cards featuring new stamps, dies, and stencils from the My Favorite Things July 2020 release. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more cards featuring My Favorite Things stamps and dies that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to my channel to never miss a new card making video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.